Welcome back, everyone, to the 21st Century Man podcast. Today, we're going to be diving deep into a topic that I think is on a lot of people's minds, certainly on my mind, and I'm sure it is on yours as well.
Absolutely.
That's right, we are talking about retirement, specifically chapter 63 of the 21st Century Man.
Retirement. Point, counterpoint. Clever title.
It is a clever title, and this chapter is really fascinating because it brings together a lot of different voices and viewpoints on the topic. And as always, the 21st Century Man does a fantastic job of giving you this well-rounded perspective. I mean, we hear from Jack Graham, who is a businessman who has gone through retirement himself. We hear from Michael Abassian, who is an MPH researcher. So he's got that master of public health looking at trends in population health. And then, of course, some initial thoughts from Dr. Judson Brandeis.
Wow, they really pulled out all the stops on this one.
They really did. And so for you listening, our mission in this deep dive is really to explore, I think, the multifaceted realities of retirement, right? What are the potential joys? What are the things that you really need to be thinking about to make that post-work life actually fulfilling? And we're going to, of course, unpack the key arguments, the actionable takeaways that are presented in this chapter, specifically for you, our listeners. So let's jump right in. Dr. Brandeis makes a really key observation right off the bat. He says that retirement, it's not a one-size-fits-all experience.
Yeah, it's definitely not a guarantee, right? Like, I think we all kind of have this picture of retirement as being this, like, blissful time.
Yeah.
But Dr. Brandeis is careful to point out that the reality is, it can range from deliriously happy to absolutely miserable for some.
Yeah, he really highlights that spectrum. And so that tells us right away that it's not just about reaching that finish line of stopping work. There's more to it.
Right. It takes some action, some planning, right?
Exactly. And this is a theme that comes up throughout the 21st Century Man, the need for intentional, purposeful planning when it comes to retirement. It's about shaping that next chapter in a way that aligns with what you want out of life.
Oh, for sure. Like, retirement is not just something that happens to you. It's something you got to kind of create, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting because, the chapter does mention this 2019 survey where 40% of retirees, so a good chunk, said they found the transition not at all challenging.
So that's encouraging. It means it's possible.
Right.
To have, like, a smooth and happy transition into retirement?
Exactly, yeah. But then we get to Michael Abassian's perspective, and he really brings us down to earth, doesn't he? He's like, hold on, there's some serious challenges here that a lot of men especially are facing.
Yeah, his piece is really important to ground our expectations a bit.
Yeah.
And he points to kind of a foundational issue, which is that a lot of men today are just not financially prepared for retirement.
Yeah, and he's careful to point out that the landscape of retirement is just changing so rapidly, especially compared to, like, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation.
Yeah, totally different ballgame now.
Totally. And he has some, like, eye-popping statistics to back this up. For example, the fact that a quarter of 65-year-olds, so 1 in 4, are now expected to live past 90, that's huge. Like, we're talking potentially decades of life after you stop working.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? Like, longer lifespans, that's amazing. But it means you need so much more saved up.
Absolutely. And then he has this other statistic that over half of baby boomers are anticipating that they'll need to work in some capacity after they officially retire.
Yeah, whether it's to make ends meet or maybe just to stay active and keep busy.
Exactly. It really kind of, like, blurs those lines of what retirement traditionally looked like, doesn't it? And then, of course, we can't forget the crucial role of Social Security. I mean, Abassian says it keeps 27 million Americans out of poverty.
Wow. That is a massive safety net.
It really is, yeah. And he also highlights these, like, consistent concerns that pre-retirees year after year keep expressing. And it's not just like, fleeting worries. These are, like, deep anxieties about what retirement is going to look like financially.
Like, am I going to be okay? Can I actually afford this?
Exactly. Yeah, things like, their savings not keeping pace with inflation, especially right now. That's a huge concern for a lot of people.
Huge.
And then, the potential inability to cover, like, really big expenses like healthcare and long-term care. These are huge costs that, as you get older, are just looming there.
Scary stuff.
Yeah. And he points out that over half of men, 54% to be exact, worry about depleting their savings entirely during retirement. Like, it's just running out of money. That's a huge fear.
Totally. And then on top of that, you have 60% of men who are, at least somewhat worried about being able to afford good health care as they age.
So we've got longer lifespans, the need to keep working, the crucial role of Social Security, these financial anxieties, right? It can paint a pretty concerning picture. It can, for sure.
But then, the 21st century man is so good at this, it transitions into a recap, right?
Mhm.
It's like, okay, let's take a step back and look at some key retirement trends. Like, where are we at right now?
Right, like some data points to ground us in this conversation.
Yeah. So first of all, the average retirement age right now, 65 for men, 63 for women.
Okay.
But here's the thing. The chapter highlights that the population of folks 65 and older, it's projected to increase dramatically, like from 56 million now to over 78 million by 2035.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
It's huge. It's
Yep.
like retirement is becoming, it's just this massive, massive part of our society.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that the chapter points out is the increased life expectancy after retirement, particularly for men. So think about it. Like in the 1940s, a 65-year-old man might expect to live another 13 years.
Okay.
Now it's over 18 years. That's an extra 5 years.
Yeah, which is great, of course, but
Yeah, of course it's great.
you got to plan for it.
Absolutely. So it has huge implications for, your savings, your healthcare needs, everything. Yeah, and speaking of planning, this section also mentions a super helpful tool from the Social Security Administration, their online longevity tool.
Oh, yeah, I love this tool.
I know, right? So you can actually go online. It's at https://www.ssa.gegi-binlongevity.cgi.
Okay, so write that down, everyone. https://www.ssa.govcgla.binlongevity.cgi.
And you plug in your information, and it gives you an estimate of, based on averages, how many more years you can expect to live.
It's super helpful for starting to think about your retirement timeline, right? Like, how much time are we actually talking about here?
Totally. And when we're talking about Social Security, age is obviously a huge factor in when you decide to claim your benefits.
Huge.
But it's super important to understand, like, what are the trade-offs? Because claiming early, like at 62, can really reduce your benefits.
Yeah, the chapter mentions it can be as much as 30% lower if you claim before your full retirement age.
Which is substantial. That 30% might not seem like a lot now, but over 20, 30 years of retirement, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, every month that's less income.
Right. So the 21st century man really emphasizes, think about your individual goals, your health, your overall financial situation before you make that decision.
It's a big one. And something that really stood out to me in this recap section was the difference in how men and women approach kind of the psychological side of retirement planning,
Yeah, that was interesting.
It was interesting, right? So apparently men are less likely than women to really give serious thought to how their life is going to change.
Like beyond just the money, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 53% of men versus 62% of women, so a sizable difference.
So like only about half of men are actually like actively thinking ahead about this.
Yeah, which, kind of makes you worry, right? Like, retirement is such a huge life transition. It's not just about finances. It's about your identity, your routine, your social connections.
Totally. The 21st century man is really advocating for a holistic approach.
Right.
Like, you got to think about all of these pieces.
Absolutely. And then it gets even, more kind of, I guess, realistic in a way, because it talks about how men are also less likely to have a relative who can care for them as they get older.
Yeah, it's something we don't always like to think about. But
No, but it's real, right? And
Yeah.
the statistic is pretty stark. 4 out of 10 retirees don't have someone they can count on for care.
So it's like really important to have those support systems in place, whether it's family, friends, or, some kind of planned care.
Absolutely, yeah. And all of this leads to that recommendation that they give to start planning for retirement at least 5 years in advance.
Makes sense. Give yourself time to really think it through.
Right. Both financially, emotionally, all of it. So we've got longer retirements, careful planning, and the chapter then dives specifically into the role of Social Security benefits, which we've touched on a bit, but it gives us some more juicy details here.
Yeah, and I think it really underscores how important Social Security is, as that safety net.
Huge safety net. I mean, they point out that 9 out of 10 Americans 65 and older are receiving Social Security benefits.
That's almost everybody.
It's almost everybody, yeah. And the total amount paid out every year is over $1 trillion. That's going to 65 million Americans.
It's just mind-boggling how much money we're talking about.
It really is. And the chapter gives us a bit of a history lesson, too, reminding us that the Social Security Act was signed all the way back in 1935.
Oh, wow. So almost a century ago.
Yeah. And the goal was to provide those monthly benefits to retirees 65 and older, and it was funded through payroll taxes, so the money that comes out of your paycheck.
Okay, so it's like you're paying into it while you're working.
Exactly, yeah. And it's interesting to see how the numbers have changed over time. So by the end of 1967, there were over 7 million retired men getting an average of $95 a month,
Okay.
which, when you adjust that for inflation, that's like $735 in today's money.
Gosh.
But then fast forward to July of 2020, almost 23 million retired men getting almost $17,000 a year on average.
Huge increase.
Massive. And the 21st century man even includes this really helpful figure 63.1, which breaks down the benefit payouts by age for men.
I love when they give us these visuals. It makes it so much easier to understand.
It really does. But then, the chapter kind of hits us with this like reality check, which is that the future of Social Security is kind of uncertain right now.
Yeah, there's that looming concern about the trust fund potentially being depleted by 2034.
Yeah. And if that happens, they're projecting a 23% cut in benefits, which would be huge.
Especially because so many people rely on Social Security, right?
Totally, yeah. 1 in 5 married retired Americans and 2 in 5 unmarried retirees are completely dependent on those benefits.
So any cut would be devastating for them.
Absolutely, yeah. It really highlights the importance of, policymakers addressing this, ensuring that the system is sustainable for the long term.
Yeah, that's a huge issue.
Yeah. So we've talked about Social Security, but now let's shift gears to the other big piece of the retirement puzzle: savings.
Right, because you can't just rely on Social Security alone.
No, and the 21st century man lays out some pretty, sobering statistics here. So the average retirement savings for people 56 to 61, so just about to retire, is $17,000.
Okay.
But remember, that's an average. Half of people in that age group have less than that.
Which is not a lot to live on, especially for potentially decades.
It's not, and this is where it gets really scary. The median retirement savings for the entire U.S. population is only $5,000.
Right.
And for younger workers, those 32 to 37, the median is a measly $480.
That's nothing.
It's essentially nothing. And the chapter's really good at pointing out how misleading those averages can be.
Yeah, some people are probably doing great,
No,
but the median shows us the bigger picture, which is that a lot of people are not prepared.
not even close.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a strong link between income and how prepared you are for retirement.
It makes sense. The more you earn, the more you can potentially save.
Right. So half of pre-retirees with incomes over $100,000, their main source of income in retirement is going to be a retirement plan, like a 401k or something. But only 14% of those earning under $50,000 can say the same.
That's a huge gap.
It's a massive gap, yeah. And to make matters even more challenging, employer-provided retiree health care is becoming less and less common.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the chapter cites a study from the Kaiser Family Foundation that found only 23% of large companies are offering retiree health coverage.
So if you're counting on that, you might be out of luck.
You might be, yeah. And then finally, the chapter talks about when men typically start saving for retirement. The average age is 26, which isn't terrible.
Not great, not terrible.
Yeah, but here's the kicker. Half of men don't start saving at all.
Okay, that's not good.
So the message is clear, right? Start saving early and don't just assume Social Security or employer-provided health care will cover everything.
You got to be proactive.
Absolutely. But now, after all that kind of doom and gloom, the 21st century man does this really brilliant thing where it brings in Jack Graham to talk about the joys of retirement.
A nice dose of optimism.
Right. And Jack Graham, he's like this shining example of how retirement can actually be this amazing, fulfilling time.
Yeah, it's good to see that side of it, too.
Totally. So he tells his story, right? He worked for 45 years in 2 different careers, and he started really focusing on retirement about 6 years before he actually retired. He met with a financial planner.
Smart move.
Really smart. And he says he never feared retirement, like he actually looked forward to it, to being busy and having this stress-free life.
That's a good attitude.
Yeah, and he has this great piece of advice that a friend gave him, which is stay busy doing things you enjoy and don't worry about things you can't control.
Love that. Simple but powerful.
It is. And he really emphasizes the importance of taking some time to think about what retirement means to you, what do you want to get out of it.
Yeah, define it for yourself.
Exactly. And for him, it was about being happy, healthy, financially secure, and having a sense of purpose.
Okay, so he's got those 4 pillars.
And he finds that purpose in a lot of different places, right? First and foremost, his relationship with his wife, being able to spend more quality time together, travel.
Nice.
And then also his family, his kids, his grandkids. That became a huge source of joy and purpose for him.
Yeah, family is so important.
It really is. And he's also really big on volunteer work. He's been involved in Rotary for over 31 years, even served as president.
Wow, that's commitment.
It is, and it shows how you can still make a difference, be part of the community, even after you leave your job.
Right, it's not all about, sitting on a beach somewhere.
No, not at all. And of course, he's got his hobbies too, like travel, golf, fitness.
Staying active, keeping busy.
Exactly. And he's really intentional about his health. Him and his wife go for brisk walks every day. They do strength training twice a week.
Good for them.
He really emphasizes taking care of your body so you can enjoy those retirement years.
In your mind, too, right?
Absolutely. He also talks about the influence of his parents, who he calls the greatest generation, and how they really instilled in him those values, that sense of purpose.
He used to have those role models.
It is, yeah. And he keeps coming back to the joy he gets from spending time with his kids and grandkids, really emphasizing that sense of nurturing the next generation.
Yeah, that's powerful.
It is. And then he talks about something that, you don't always hear people talk about openly, but it's so important, especially in a long-term relationship, which is intimacy.
Right, because that doesn't just go away when you retire.
No, not at all. And he shares his experience with BioTE hormone pellets and how they've actually, positively impacted their intimacy after nearly 50 years of marriage.
Wow.
And he's just so open and honest about it, which I think is great.
It's refreshing, for sure.
And finally, he talks about managing stress by surrounding yourself with positive people and letting go of those toxic relationships.
That's good advice for any stage of life, really.
It is, yeah. And he ends with this beautiful quote from Mark Twain, which is, "Retirement, it's an adventure of exploring, dreaming, and discovering."
Oh, I love that.
Isn't it great? It really captures that, optimistic, proactive approach to retirement that Jack Graham embodies.
Yeah, inspiring.
It really is. So this deep dive into Chapter 63 of The 21st Century Man has really been eye-opening, hasn't it? We've talked about financial planning, Social Security, the importance of having a purpose, staying active, and prioritizing your well-being in those post-work years.
There's been a lot to think about, but in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really encourage everyone listening, if you haven't already, check out The 21st Century Man. It's such a valuable resource for, navigating all stages of life.
Couldn't agree more. So much wisdom in that book.
So much wisdom, yeah. So thank you for joining us for this deep dive. And be sure to tune in next time when we explore Chapter 64, Work-Life Balance.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's going to be a juicy one. So we'll see you next time on the 21st Century Man podcast.